Welcome to another episode of Women in Family Business. We are WIFB, the global initiative for women to share their stories and expertise on matters related to the family enterprise. On this episode, we're joined by Christina Wing, the founder of Wingspan Legacy Partners, a seasoned faculty member at Harvard Business School and a business owner herself. Christina unlocks the transformative power of tackling tough conversations head-on in family businesses. Gear up for a journey into the core of family communication, where we explore how the hardest discussions can lead to the strongest connections. The art of communication is the glue that holds family businesses together, yet it's often the toughest nut to crack. Why do families in business dance around the conversations that matter most? Conflict, relationships, illness. These topics are the bedrock of our family dynamics, but are often shrouded in silence. This silence can ripple through generations, affecting everything from who holds the reins to how decisions are made. Enjoy this episode with Christina. Christina, you and I are going to have a difficult conversation about difficult conversations. And I really love this topic, especially in the context of the family business. It's a very necessary topic that you take very much to heart and that you're very passionate about. But first, questions first, like why would you want to be the person to bring up such a challenging topic in the family enterprise arena?
It is not the most popular topic in general. For me, the passion comes from the fact that I think I could have had so many different outcomes in my own life if my family had engaged in difficult conversations. Not only would I have had different outcomes with my family, but I would have had different outcomes through the different chapters of my life. Because things that my family didn't talk about at home or in business, I kind of carried with me, and I also didn't talk about them. And it took until I was almost 50 to start talking about the things that actually really matter. And for me, pushing others to encourage them, push them, nudge them to do this, it's hopefully so that they can have, more honest and true relationships.
What do you think is the main reason why, even though we have so much riding on good communication, right? Like, even though so much depends on us having challenging conversations, why is it so hard for us to do it, even though the stakes are so high?
I think that there's a little bit of a fear factor that people have about engaging in a difficult conversation that nothing will change. And so, if you really think about it, if you take the time to have a difficult conversation with somebody, it's because you care. But you have to go into it with a goal. If your goal is simply complaining, then that's not a difficult conversation. That's a complaint. If your goal is changed behavior and working together to get there, then there is a result that's worth it. But I believe many of us feel that people aren't going to change. It's been this way forever. Why rock the boat? Or let somebody else do it. And what we end up doing is having these difficult conversations behind the scenes. So everyone's having their little mini difficult conversations, but nobody really wants to address the elephant in the room.
What do you think we're really afraid of in that kind of a conversation? Like, I always wonder this, like, do you think the overweighing fear is to hurt others, or to, as you said, like rock the boat, or sort of like, stir up things that feel like that might lead to unraveling bigger conflicts? Or are we inherently just really always protecting ourselves from rejection and sort of like misunderstandings?
I think the biggest fear is rejection. And what that means is not just rejection of the difficult conversation, but a bigger rejection, a more permanent rejection. Suddenly you compromise your relationship with said person. And that leads to compromising your relationship maybe in the business. And it leads to you compromising your relationship with others. There's this fear that a difficult conversation with one person leads to potential isolation from the group. And that's a very scary thing. I also believe that many people, when they embark on a difficult conversation, the person receiving, the inclination is to be defensive and judgmental. And so our best strategy is to actually have them more often so that they're not as, okay, everything's been perfect for 5 years and now Christina's going to drop the big bomb. We should talk about difficult things more often. And then it's not as big of a deal. But the other thing is, sometimes it's easier to be peaceful, and I think easier in the moment. And so those moments accumulate. If it's like, well, I'm not going to bring it up at Thanksgiving. Well, I'm not going to bring it up at Christmas. I'm not going to bring it up at Hanukkah. I'm not going to bring it up at like it becomes the times when families convene are also times that shouldn't be the time for those difficult conversations. But we feel that for some reason, especially holidays, they stimulate angst and other issues that these conversations typically happen then and they're not well received. And so then it's like go back under your covers for another 10 years.
Okay, I'm very wary, Christina, of like, that uncle or that cousin who's decided that their role is to be the devil's advocate. What now is the difference between someone doing that, where they basically use that role to just say things because they really want to say them, right? And between someone who addresses a difficult conversation in a way that then is constructive for everybody. So not just addressing, but actually conversing. Where do you see that nuance?
So that difficult uncle is a contrarian, and his goal is to be center of attention. And so the goal of this conversation is to have a voice, be center of attention, and kind of poke people. He does not have a goal of change in behavior. And so a difficult conversation is typically about a perceived change in behavior, change of information flow, change of how you do things. We all have that uncle, and you're kind of like, oh, here goes Uncle Sam again. But what my view is, we all know that's Uncle Sam, and guess what? He's never going to have the ability to have an authentic, difficult conversation because he's already ruined his ability to converse with the family. He doesn't have that voice. That person is probably the same way at work. Probably everybody wants to get Mexican food and he says Chinese. It's just, contrarians are contrarians. And a contrarian is not somebody that it's easy to engage in a difficult conversation with. However, you have to sometimes. And so a contrarian takes it even more effort to have one with. And what that means is you've got to be well thought out and you kind of have to make it on your terms instead of even meeting in the middle. Everyone else, I feel like it should be meeting in the middle, but a contrarian that already has their backup has to be approached even differently.
What you have to do to build that credibility in the family, to be the kind of person that maybe finds more acceptance for raising a subject like that, and what you've observed, what kind of people have been successful at it, what kind of traits do they share?
It really depends on the situation and how the person is viewed by the person receiving it. And so I might view you a certain way, and we could have a very productive, difficult conversation. However, if we don't know each other's roles, a difficult conversation comes off really, really poorly. In other words, many people think, oh, the peacemaker in the family should be the one to have the difficult conversations. Absolutely not, because the peacemaker is somebody that wants to keep the peace, but not necessarily understand that sometimes you have to break things to make them better. And so the perfect person to engage difficult conversations are people that really listen. And so people that listen to what's being said and what's not being said and have the intuition to kind of see around corners. Like I said at the beginning, we only should engage in these difficult conversations. It's going to improve something. If there's a common goal of improving, that doesn't mean the person you have it with has to share your goal, but it means you have to go in with a goal. And that at least will hopefully enable the person to listen. There are a lot of other topics that we're not even talking about that are worse, like addiction, like divorce, happiness. We don't talk about any of these things. We really, in many families, don't even talk about happiness because it's almost perceived if we talk about how happy we are, we're not working hard enough. And so it's this intersection of family, money, and work that makes almost no topic safe. Yet, if you watch the news with your family or you view a situation, families are very good about talking about difficult things about others. So we all know these hot buttons are in all of our heads. It only makes sense that we should have to be able to talk about it with one another.
Let's talk about like maybe a few of these choice, like very, very difficult topics. Like, because I do think, and I think you brought one up at the very beginning, and I actually think we don't talk about this often enough about sort of like diversity of thought and diversity of lifestyles and how that contributes to how you're able to be part of a family and how you're able to contribute. If you do choose another religion or you choose to marry someone from another religion, if you do have a different lifestyle than the rest of the family or you make different lifestyle choices, how do we learn to have that conversation and sort of like understand how rich it actually is when the family is open to that diversity and is open to embracing all the different kinds of like lifestyle decisions everyone can make?
When you think of many first generation entrepreneurs, many of them are immigrants, and they immigrate from another place to wherever their new place is. And what they have is the shirt on their back and their family. They also bring the culture from where they came from. And these immigrants are the hardest workers. They stay unified as a family. And suddenly, I think that the next generations think to celebrate what they did, we have to do it the same way. We have to all be of this religion and do these kind of things. And yet, in reality, the first generation left what they had. They brought some of it, but they started over. And so, the best way to encourage diversity of thought and action is to remind everyone to be entrepreneurial. If you have a family that is always making cars, but they don't innovate, then that car company is going to die at some point. You have to keep innovating. And when you innovate in business and you innovate in what people are allowed to do, like allowed, encouraged, I should say, that starts to bring in diversity of everything. And that's how we get better.
When people are hurt, when people suffer from the expectations, we do have a lot of cases of mental health challenges in the family enterprise system. So when you're actually dealing with something that almost seems like an effect of your inability to have those conversations as a family, and you're suddenly faced with someone who's actually faced with like a very acute health situation because of it. I mean, it's definitely not when you want to start having those conversations, but if you have to, how do you do that? If your family doesn't really have that culture, of having those conversations to begin with, and that's a really difficult position to be in.
Mental health has been so understudied, and so many things contribute to it, including sleep deprivation. Now, a chronic issue is something that we have to figure out how to get away from permanent stigmatizing of people. And so a lot of addiction, people are afraid to talk about it, both the person that needs help and the person that you can see needs help, because it feels like they'll be for the rest of their life cast as, "Well, she's an alcoholic," or "she's this," or "she's that." We have to realize that there are chapters of in life where we all have mental health needs, and it's a matter of why not take the air out of it before it gets too big. And in these cases in particular, I think these should be the easiest difficult conversations, because it should be, "I'd like to sit down and talk to you. Can we get together tomorrow? I want to let you know in advance. I want to talk to you about something that's concerning me, just so you're prepared." We go to a neutral spot so that it's not my turf or your turf. And it's basically the goal of me sitting down with you is, I love you to death and I'm worried. And I've noticed now that every time I see you, you've had too much to drink. Or I've noticed that in the last 10 meals, you haven't eaten one bite. What can I do to help? I'm here. And it's stating the goal. The goal is your safety. It's showing the empathy. I'm only doing this because I care about you. And then how do we work on it? And I think that if we could start to have more of those conversations, so many of our problems wouldn't escalate.
How would you go about identifying which topics should come first?
First, our behavior has to change in general, not just around difficult conversations, but take the time. If you take the time to ask somebody something, ask them something you care about, or just don't ask. We don't have to have these just polite conversations always. So start, leaning into people. Start small. But in terms of families that want to see change, everybody doesn't want change. And so that is the first thing that people have to recognize. And so if everybody wanted change, it'd be so easy. We'd always get together and be like, "Okay, we're going to change things." It's not like, redecorating a living room where everybody wants to get a new rug and now we can debate it. And so you need to build trust with your family that your intentions are good, just like in business. Family business or other business, you can't just come in and be like, "I'm the new kid, I want everything to change," because people have been there doing it. So you have to earn your place, and you earn your place by being a good, kind family member, listening and respecting what people that have come before you have thought, understanding their perspective. You do not have to agree with it, but take the time to understand where it comes from. You might just be like, "Oh, grandma's so stubborn." Well, why is she that stubborn? Maybe she wants you to eat all your food because she didn't have food when she was young. Like, just take the time to listen. And then once you've done that, then don't treat people like they're not smart. So don't try to manipulate them into what you want. Be very blunt. "Grandma, I really want to talk to you about something, and this is so uncomfortable for me, and I have so much respect for you, but would you mind if we got together? Because there's something I'd like to address." And if grandma says no, then give her a month and go back to her again. And this time it's, "Grandma, I brought this up a month ago, and I really care about us and our relationship. I'd like to sit down and talk to you about something." She will say yes eventually. Here's the thing. Most likely, your first difficult conversation, you're going to fail in your opinion, because if you've waited, you're pent up and the other person's not ready. But that doesn't mean you give up. You have that difficult conversation, you express that love, and you express the goal for why you would like to see certain things change. It's not for self benefit, it's for communal benefit. And you keep trying. And the more it happens, the less people talk behind everyone's back. And the more the person that you're having this conversation with is part of the collective conversation. Because let's be clear, families gossip, work people gossip. Grandma's difficult. I'm not the only one that thinks so. I'm probably talking to my cousins and my brother, my this. That's kind of unfair. It's when you think about it, how would you feel if you were on the receiving end and everybody is too nervous to talk to you, but everyone's gossiping about you? And so you care enough to want something to change, care enough to include that person in it instead of excluding them by doing it all behind their back. And we all do it. I do it. You get on the phone with one parent, you talk about a sibling sometimes, and it's not malicious, but then it just kind of gets out of whack. Instead, just the source.